Bindigin, bindigin, wea hey ya ho, wea hey ya ho, bindigin, bindigin, wea hey ya ho, wea hey yo, wea yo, wea yo, wea yo, wea yo.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I hope you're all doing well this evening. My name is Suzanne Mose, and I'm the head of curatorial services here at the Niagara Falls Museums. Before we get moving with tonight's program, I would like to take a minute to acknowledge that the Niagara region of Ontario is located on the traditional shared territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Chinatun peoples. The Chinatun people have called these lands home for thousands of years, and more recently, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee have been sharing the land as one dish, one spoon treaty territory. So with those important and very relevant words being said, I would like to thank you all very much for joining us for our fourth and our final evening of our Four Directions speaker series. My colleague, Darcy Belanger, will be your host this evening. Darcy works with us here at the museum as an Indigenous programs coordinator, and he's been the driving force behind this fabulous series and all of these talks. And my sincere appreciation and thanks go out to him from myself and the entire museum staff. Just one little bit of housekeeping before we get moving, and I hand it over to Darcy, who will introduce our guest this evening. And that's that we ask you to hold your questions until the end, if you wouldn't mind. There's a great little question and answer function on your screen at the bottom or the top, depending on what device you're using. So we just ask that when we get to the end, you use that function to go ahead and ask Nicole whatever questions you have. We are going to leave the chat function open as well, so you can use that to comment and sort of chat back and forth throughout the presentation if you'd like. But again, the Q&A at the end. So that's it for me. I'll hand it over to Darcy, who will be your host this evening. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Suzanne. Welcome, everybody. If you've been following along on each of the directions, thank you so much for following us, coming along with us in this journey. And tonight is a special night. We have Nicole Joy-Fraser that's going to be sharing with us. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Nicole so you have a good idea on who she is. Nicole Joy-Fraser is of mixed European, Deneza, Naya, and Métis descent. She has had the incredible opportunity to work as professional performing arts for the last 20 years and across Turtle Island with many celebrated companies such as Mervish Productions, Factory Theatre, Native Earth, Red Sky, the Blythe Festival, the Charlottetown Festival, the Toronto
Mendelssohn.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Choir, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, the 2010 Vancouver Cultural Olympiad, the Smithsonian Museum in New York City, and most recently was invited to the acting company of this season's Stratford Festival. Nicole also enjoys living across the Atlantic for a few years, where she performed in the multi-award winning musical Jerry Springer, the opera, in the West End, and in Disney's Beauty and the Beast, which toured the UK and had a short run in Athens. As a 60s Scoop witness, she yearned to make her way home and is grateful to have premiered and collaborate in so many roles since within the Indigenous theater and opera, all of which has helped her reclaim her Indigenous identity. Nicole currently lives in Niagara on the Lake, where her partner and son, and has been grateful for her local work with Essential Collective Theatre, Carousel Players, and the Soul Arts Festival, First Ontario Performing Arts Centre, and Celebrations of Nations. She has been a helper in the community, having worked at the Niagara Regional Native Centre, Niagara Chapter Native Women, and in the Indigenous Education Department at Niagara College. Nicole continues to look forward to promoting and sharing Indigenous ways of knowing, and as a proud Bear Clan member and a hand drum carrier, support each other through healing and the cultural arts. And I'm proud to present a friend of mine, Nicole Joy-Fraser.
Thanks so much, Darcy. I'm trying to imagine there's like a crowd in front of me. So I'm doing that actor's imagination of being at the front or being in the middle of a really, really big circle. And I know I have lots of friends and family that have tuned in. And I really, really appreciate being given this incredible opportunity, this platform to share my story and to shed some light on what it's like to be not just a performing artist, but an Indigenous artist. So for this to happen was a real surprise for me, because at the beginning of all this, these times of the pandemic, I'd only been a couple weeks into rehearsal for All's Well That Ends Well by William Shakespeare, my first season at the Stratford Festival. And we were just about to sort of launch. And there was a lot of anticipation in the air, obviously at the festival, and being a newcomer and being welcomed there. And so to have that suddenly change so quickly, dramatically, and then, you know, I kept thinking, okay, how do I accept this? And this is an opportunity for me to look at my tools of not just self-care and wellness, but, you know, what do I need to find that balance and in coping with this travesty, right? And this, the trauma that not just myself and my family were experiencing, but like all over the world. So I was feeling quite isolated and not myself. It hasn't been easy for me, even though I knew there were moments where I knew I had what I needed to cope and deal, and I had a roof over my head. I had these basic survival things, and more than enough sacred items in my life and a belief system, everything that's led me up to this point. I remember writing to someone about, I feel like I know deep down I have everything I need to cope and to move forward through a challenging time, because I've been there before and I've been through worse. But this is a real test. This is really something. And when you're trying to navigate through that grief and not feeling yourself and feeling off center, and you're trying to take care of a 4-year-old at the same time, homeschooling your partner, your family, it's really something. And it's really something what you go through and what you realize. So I was obviously grieving my loss of work, my job. I was so grateful the emergency benefit came into play, because I was like, what are we going to do? And, the calendar in my phone had all the landmarks of, opening night and rehearsals and previews. And so every time that would pop up, I'd have to go through that grieving process and acknowledging and just letting myself go through it. And it wasn't long before Darcy, you phoned me and said, I have this idea. I don't know what you're up to and how are you doing, hanging in there. And at first I was like, I had written off doing anything online, because I'm very, it's not one of my mediums, and I've never been that social media savvy person. Like I barely know how to use my Instagram, and I'm like, am I doing this tweet right? Like, I'm not always sure how to save photos and share and retweet and all these things that I know naturally I've been a bit resistant to, because I like to lay low. But in our industry, I know people are like, but you're a performer. Why wouldn't you want to get out there and get seen and be seen? I was really hesitant, and also because I just wasn't feeling like my best self. And I thought, I'm just going to take a break and do what I need to do. So, when I was taking those times that I practiced smudging and anything that I need for my self-care, I was, sending out that trust, and was so grateful when Darcy phoned up and offered this to me. I thought, well, I guess I have something I can share. And I have had opportunities previous to this to just share what I've been through with the District School Board Niagara and other opportunities in community and around Southern Ontario. So I just trusted that there'd be enough and people would want to hear. So I really thank everybody. I thank Niagara Falls Museum and everyone working behind the scenes. My partner's also a standby tech person. He's nearby, he's tuned in. His name is Jason Chesworth, and we met at the Blythe Festival, actually. And so he's now working backstage, deck electrician at the Shaw Festival. So it's very handy, and I really appreciate everything he's done for my setup here. And this is another world for me. I'm usually just, you tell me where to go and show up, and so thank you. And my little boy is outside as well. So hopefully, we have some peace and quiet for the next little while as we settle in. So something that you heard in my bio, obviously, is when I say I'm a 60s Scoop witness, I was thinking about it today. I'm like, why can't I just own the title of survivor? And maybe I need to preface that with, some people don't even know what that is. I always need to retrack. I was adopted. I was born Nicole Johnson in Vancouver, British Columbia, to Judy and Mike Johnson. Judy was 18, and they actually were both adopted. Both my birth parents were adopted. Judy was from Horse Lake First Nation. Her birth mother still speaks Cree. And then her birth father is the Métis Deneza lineage, Bill McAllister. And Bill was one of the people trying to set up a, it's not actually a cricket, that's someone's phone. I was like, oh, there's a cricket in the house. No, that's someone's. Dawn, get off your phone. No, he actually asked for a phone today, my son. Can I have a phone, mommy? No. Sorry, tangent. Yeah, Bill McAllister was one of the leaders up in that community in northern Alberta, Treaty 8 territory, fighting for an actual like reserve for the Métis people in that area, Peace River, and so I didn't actually know all of this when I was born. I must say that. And that's okay. I did know I was Native. My dad, who raised me, I always say I have my dad and my mom, and then there's my birth parents. My mom came to get me when I was 18 months old, and she had actually gotten the call from my birth father. So Mike, I guess that's why I can't officially say I was scooped. You know, a lot of people, that term is used because the government and family services, child services, literally went in through the 50s and 60s and even earlier and much later. There's many of us that are part of that huge umbrella of being removed from our families or not being raised by our natural parents, our natural culture, our original people, our nations. So I wasn't one of the people that was scooped. It's unique, and I don't know how many other survivors have gone through this, but my birth parents were having troubles, and I think because of their history as well, they just wanted to know that I was going to go somewhere safe. And so it was my birth father who said, well, how about I call my sister? Now, this is his sister by adoption, Carol, who already had a son of her own. And he was already 10, Neil, my older brother. And they were living in Mississauga. And she asked Don Fraser, you know, how would you feel about going to, about raising this little girl? My brother, Mike, is considering adoption, and he'd rather that she go to someone in the family as opposed to go to somewhere they didn't know. So I feel really, that's a real blessing in that I stayed in the family. And I look at it like I was kind of adopted by my aunt, even though she wasn't my aunt through blood, right? But she was still a part of the family. And my birth parents got to see where I was going, you know. So she got there, and Judy and Mike were like, so can you take her baby brother too? So I don't know if Matt's out there, or Lisa, his partner, his wife. I have a younger brother named Matt, and he was born Dwayne. And so there were two of us, and Carol, you know, they couldn't afford the both of us, but she called the other sister who lived in Montreal and said, hey, there's a baby here, a brother and sister. We should try to keep them together somehow. So Marlene in Montreal, the other sister, Mike's other sister, so our other aunt, said, okay, let's, we'll take the little boy and they can be cousins. I also have another aunt named Auntie Joyce. I don't know if you're out there tonight, Auntie Joyce, but I'm thinking of you, California. She was seriously considering adopting us too. And she had her own kids. She had 3, and she had come to visit us because she was pretty close to my birth father. And there's pictures of me, Polaroid pictures of me with her kids that she showed me years later. Like I was in my 30s when she said, hey, I found this. And so it's kind of amazing when I think back to how everybody was trying to take care and make sure we were off the books. Like there were no records or paper trail for us. I mean, we did everything. My mom got a lawyer and we went through the courts. But like I said, there was no official thing saying this is where she's from. She's Indigenous, you know, and my parents they decide, okay, well, she's going to be raised in Mississauga. So I had I describe it as like a very like a middle class, absolutely privileged upbringing. I mean, we had a humble bungalow. I don't know if any of you have been to Mississauga, Ontario, but it's now just covered in mansions. The bungalows have been bulldozed over, and it's a beautiful part of Ontario, though, because it's not too far from Lake Ontario, and it used to be cottage country. So I have really fond memories growing up, and like we had half an acre out back and these big willow trees, and I was always outside. So because I was always outside, you know, I knew I was different. I don't even remember a time when I knew I wasn't brown and my parents were white, because you just see it. So I just knew my whole life I came from someone else's belly, but this was my mom and this was my dad and that's my brother. Like, I just always knew I was adopted. But my mom, the way my mom phrased it, or like there was a special, she used to say, "You're very special," you know, and I got to come and get you in Vancouver. And so I never questioned it. And if anyone asked me, "Where's your mom? Where's your dad?" and school and stuff, I remember being a kid. And when you're kids, you just say it as it is. And oh, well, that's my mom over there, but I didn't come from her belly, but she's my mom. And then you go, oh, okay. And then you get back to it. Right. So, and if somebody would say, well, what's adoption? And I'd say, well, I came into this world in someone else's belly, but then I got to be with my mom when I was a baby. And that's how it is. And I was introduced to, actually, I keep saying, this is like my sort of beginning story. And I did want to say from the top that my experience is uniquely my own, and I can't speak on behalf of everything you've heard up to this point about my background, my lineage, where I come from, where I live now, where I used to live. Like, it's just my own experience, and I'm just speaking on behalf of my own personal experience. And anything I say as well, I just need to reiterate, make sure people understand that, you know, it's just my opinion. It's not the opinion of Darcy or the museum, or, you know, and it's just what I've experienced, what I've come to know from my own truth and my own story, which is just my own. So I just wanted to make sure, for those of you that are being introduced perhaps to concepts or anything to do with cultural references, there's so many different nations and so many different ways that we come to be introduced to our culture, but also how we're raised and how we learn. And being in Canada, in quite one of our colonized, one of the colonies, you know, there's just so many different experiences when we identify ourselves. So, and there's obviously stereotypes and there's images and you just assume things. And so I hope this will shed light on just my own unique path as a performing artist, as a 60 Scoop, as a mother and as a woman, and someone who's living not in her like traditional territory. Like I have been on the move for such a long time as a nomadic person. I'm always moving. As an artist, I've had to tour and perform everywhere. So that little tangent there, just to make sure that that everyone understands that. And yeah, I think people would know. A lot of people, I'm sure, tuning in who I know. So where was I? So yeah, we were adopted together. My brother and I were legally cousins. And we always used to see each other because Montreal was a quick via rail train ride away. I used to love taking the train as a kid. And it was always that thing, hey, we're going to go see your brother, you know? Okay, awesome. And I didn't even say like my cousin Matthew. It was just, he's my brother, you know? And it was always a big family event when we came together over at Auntie Marlene's. So Marlene is my brother's mom. And he grew up with 3 older brothers, and very French Canadian family, and they were Catholic. So his experience was quite different from mine as well. But we always bonded whenever we saw each other. It was just always felt at home. and I still do when I'm with him. And he also dabbled in some music and singing, and plays guitar, and he's an amazing poet and singer. And he now lives in Hamilton, which is great, not too far from where I live. So, and he's just become a proud dad. He's baby Mela. I'm an auntie again. So we didn't really, for both of us, we were raised in non-Indigenous homes. We were in what I would call like a mainstream sort of upbringing. And even though we knew that we were Native, it was not, I never went out to learn about the culture, other than the way my dad introduced me to it was through the visual arts, and took me to many museums. The McMichael Art Gallery, we went there quite a bit. The AGO, we used to make a big day of it, and then we'd go to Chinatown and get Chinese, and then go check out Norval Morrisseau. And so when I, as a little kid, I would just take that in and go, oh, so we're really good at visual arts and painting, and that's how we express ourselves. So I really dove into visual arts, and I was pretty convinced I was going to do that for a living. I was like, oh, that's what we do. And I had a teacher in elementary school, Mrs. Baker, I don't know if you're out there tonight, thinking of you, who really helped me on that path and helped me to flourish as a visual artist. And I knew I had a special gift with that as a child, because there was my preschool in Mississauga was called Apple Tree Preschool, and they had asked me to do the logo, and I just drew. I think I was 4, and I drew an apple tree and a little kid swinging, and that was the logo. And I remember feeling so much encouragement from Mrs. Stevens-Gill. She just said, I hope one day I see your name somewhere and you'll be a famous artist one day. So there was already so much like good, positive energy. I never felt singled out. I never questioned my race or my otherness, which I know is unique to a lot of other people that have experienced like major racism as a kid. And I don't know how I was able to dodge that. I mean, I had a little bit of an episode sometimes if I went to day camp, or I remember something happening when I was in Girl Guides. Someone said, I don't want to be with that brown cow. And those moments hurt, but I was able to overcome them. And I had some very strong friendships in school, and strong teacher-student relationships. We were always at a very small school. So I think that really helped in terms of giving me that self-esteem and that confidence. My first time performing as a singer in front of a crowd was an evening with Beatrix Potter. And somehow I just fearlessly stood up there in front of the whole school and sang a bunny solo. Like my mom saved the program. It just says bunny solo, Nicole Johnson. And she said she was so proud of me, and I just got up and sang and got a feel for that. And my dad had introduced me to the world of opera. He was always playing classical FM. So I knew who Pavarotti was and Maria Callas, and he took me to see the Nutcracker Ballet in Toronto. And so I was enrolled in ballet lessons and loved dance. Lorne Park Public School, there was a dance club, and a teacher, Miss Foster, held a dance club after school. And so learning about Margaret Morris method as a 10-year-old, this was like a technique, a modern dance technique that came from the UK. Margaret Morris, like one of the unknown, or I shouldn't say unknown, she is known, but not as celebrated as some like Graham or some other ones that we know out there. So a big shout out to Margaret Morris, because that technique and the Dance Association is an international association, and they know, you all know who you are out there if you're listening, has influenced my life big time in terms of performing arts. There was so much encouragement. There was a summer camp we went to, it was a dance camp. And I used to go to Trent University every year for this dance camp, not knowing that there was this incredible Indigenous studies program being held like in the same building. And that land is magical. The Trent waterway and yeah, Peterborough has a special magic to it too. And little did I know that I'd be going back for other festivals. I have to remind myself to mention that later. I just remembered that I'd forgotten. But I went through school. I went to Tecumseh Public School. I didn't know who Tecumseh was. No one talked about him. Went to Lorne Park Secondary. And then it wasn't until later in high school when I started going, well, what does it actually mean? What does all this mean? And I started watching more TV. And just as you get older, obviously as a teenager, you start becoming exposed to more. And it was, I realized too, watching things like Anne Green Gables on television and seeing, wow, I don't look like anybody, but there must be Native people there. Like, where are they? Why are they not in the story? Where we're watching a movie, and I say to my mom and dad, well, where are the Native people? Well, they're there. They're just the stories about these people. And I saw a very powerful movie that starred Michelle St. John. It was my introduction to the residential school, and it was called Where the Spirit Lives, award-winning film, and groundbreaking in its time, and should still be watched today, I think, because it just gave a viewpoint of what some of those survivors went through. And I remember just being completely shocked that I hadn't been introduced to it yet. And so, and that was grade 7, actually. I'm realizing now I was a little bit younger then. And I processed that all on my own. I didn't really talk to my parents about it. I just watched it and I was like, whoa, that's horrible. Shared it with my friend. She said, oh, that's horrible. She's a non-Native friend of mine who I've grown up with since I was little. So she always had a little bit of exposure to what I was trying to like understand in terms of my identity. She still does today. She's been my friend since kindergarten. Helen Macaulay, shout out to the Macaulays. I was their other daughter at their dinner table. So yeah, processing all of that, like, what does it mean to be Indigenous? And it wasn't until I had a teacher, I don't know if it was history class or geography, but I remember being in high school and the teacher telling us what was going on at Oka. And well, Nicole, why don't you tell us a bit more about what you think of the Oka crisis? And I remember the whole class just turning around and I was like, I don't know. I know as much as you. I haven't been raised with this knowledge. I don't think my parents even, I don't think I was watching the news because I didn't know about it. But when I was put in that position, I realized, oh my gosh, I better find out what this actually means to identify, you know. I suddenly realized the magnitude of my responsibility. And it is a responsibility because as a people that hasn't been raised with history or knowledge or we haven't been raised in our culture, we haven't, you know, we've been torn from our culture and assimilated, you know, it feels like a responsibility. It's a decision up to you if you want to find out, you know, what that means and what it means for you. But I was starting to feel the need to find out more, and I think I better find out how to reply, you know, when people ask, because people were always interested. I was one of, like, we didn't have a lot of brown people at our high school, so there was like a little club of people of color. And I guess I was always surrounded by mostly white people. My family was white, and I was the one that always ventured out to meet other people from other nations and other backgrounds. And I was always the first one to meet like the foreign student or someone who's come from another country. I was always wanting to make them feel welcome. And I had an Anglican upbringing because I took myself to Sunday school with actually Camilla Briscoe and her family. Her mom, I believe her parents were both from Jamaica. And I got to hang out with them every Sunday growing up. So that was a really positive influence for me as well. My parents always said, you can choose whatever you want to believe. We'll celebrate Christmas and, you know, the national holidays, but going there and finding out what it all meant always helped me to understand, why are we celebrating about Jesus? What is this holiday about? Why am I getting pajamas for Easter? So much chocolate, what's it for? So that helped me and just give me like a value system. So I had that influence as well. So finding out about what the church did during residential, that was hard, because it's like, well, how could a church do, or how could that belief system have that happen? And, you know, it was a real coming of age, like a loss of innocence, when I started to download what was going on and what had been happening. So I had an amazing time dancing, performing in high school, performing in school productions. My dance teachers growing up kept encouraging me. The dancer studio in Mississauga, Miss Stuffy, and Leslie Ballantyne, I don't know if you're out there. I had a lot of opportunities to perform and feel nurtured in that. And was so excited when I went to see professional shows like Cats and Les Mis, and I thought, wow, so people are making a living doing that? Like, that sounds really exciting. And I fell in love with the Les Mis soundtrack and Phantom and everything that happened after that in terms of in the Toronto scene and musical theater. And I had private singing lessons with an amazing opera teacher, Eleanor Calbez, the late Eleanor Calbez. She could be a dame if we had that sort of recognition here. She is award-winning. She saw something in me and said, maybe you could sing at the Met one day. Maybe you would like to sing more classical. And so she took me through all my Royal Conservatory grades and Peel music festivals and Kiwanis music festivals. And I started learning Italian and German, and I had a bit of a conundrum, because I knew deep down, I don't think I want to sing in Italian all the time. And I think I just want to sing in English and do musical theater, because I love dancing and, you know, the the Showtime stuff. And when it felt so serious, whenever I had to do the exams for Royal Conservatory, I was like, why am I putting myself through this really stressful, contained, but I found beauty in it. Like, I knew it was beautiful, and I knew it touched my soul in some way, you know, like these arias that I was learning and the beautiful art songs. And I had a love-hate relationship with music theory, because it kind of felt like math, but there were patterns that I loved. But I never had a piano, and she was always like, oh, darling, you're going to have trouble if you go to opera school and you don't have a piano. You should, you know, your parents, you should consider it. And I like worked so hard and got my grade 2 rudiments. And then in the end, I'm like, oh, I need to come to, as I got closer to the end of high school, I was like, I need to be honest with myself. I just need to tell Eleanor, I don't think I'm going to do opera. I'm not going to be one of the first Native Americans. Like, she was just say, you could be the first Native American at the Met in New York City. And I didn't know what to say, because I didn't want to let her down. And you know, all that time, my parents and my dad drove me. Oh, they drove me all over Mississauga, all over. I didn't want to let anybody down. And anyway, so the pressure got relieved eventually. And by then, I'd been dancing so much and performing around with my dance studio. And I had, sorry, I forgot to mention the drama schooling I had in high school was pretty exceptional. I remember grade 10 taking a field trip to the Stratford Festival, and we went and saw Midsummer Night's Dream. And Ted Dykstra as Puck, Comfior was opposite, oh my gosh, Oberon. Hello. I forget who else. I forgive me for everybody else in that cast. I can't remember, but it was pretty life-changing watching that production and hearing Shakespeare and thinking. And we got a tour backstage, and I do remember thinking deep down, wouldn't it be amazing to be an actor here and to work in this theater? So that has been also a dream come true, to be recognized by that festival and to be invited in to share the space and to tell stories with them. Yeah, I haven't, like, all my interaction and my experience with the Stratford Festival has actually been really positive and safe, and unlike, you know, some people, we've been figuring out how to do things in a good, safe way, you know, representing different communities and different backgrounds. So I will say that. I just wanted to say that from my experience, because I'm sure some people have wondered, oh, how's it been for her? Yeah, there's been a lot of declarations recently from different theater companies regarding, you know, how we're going to be anti-racist at this time. And so I just, it's hard not to ignore what's going on in the rest of the world too, with all of this major activism. It's time that it happens. And I'm always praying for that as we learn and move forward. So yeah, I need to move along here and get some more songs going. I'm gonna have to put it in a nutshell. You heard in my bio that, you know, I did go abroad. I should mention I went to Randolph Academy, did their professional musical theater program, got a diploma there, and it's like a triple threat program is where you're like singer, actor, dancer, so you can audition for anything, you know, whatever's out there. And that was sort of downloaded in me. I wasn't really trained to be a creative artist that would do her own work. At that time, when the program that I did, it was all about, let's go to class, let's get better, let's train, let's do the audition. So I was blown away that I got to do, was cast in the original Toronto cast of Mamma Mia and the original North American cast. So I was 21, my first gig. Before that, I had lost my father to cancer in my second year of college, went through some major grief with that, obviously. But the flip side of going through that grief was a discovery of spirituality. And I started reading more self-help books, trying to understand, what does it mean in the afterlife? Like, why am I not equipped with coping mechanisms for grief? And started reading some things about the Great Spirit. And I was like, why don't I know more? And it was my second year of college that I met my birth father, and finally reached out and said, I would like to meet you. And he was the one that said, you're Cree. This is where you're from, Northern Alberta. And we had a really pleasant meet. For the first meeting with him, we shared some meatloaf and had a nice meal. He talked about his career in guitar. He was a singer-songwriter as well. He was touring through Alberta, and that's how he met my birth mom. And she apparently, I found out later, had an incredible voice. So music was in us, you know. And that was a really positive experience. I didn't continue a relationship with my birth father, as it had never been there really. So I sort of felt like that's what needed to be done. And I don't think I was ready to, because I already had my dad. So I had that thing of like, well, I've got my dad. It's okay. You go live your life, because I know that's what you wanted. And so I had written to Indian Affairs to find out like more. Is there any more information you have with this information that I just received? And I got nothing back. There's sort of a dead road. So that, I guess the impacts of college and trying to get out there, make my own way, took over. And then surviving, obviously, the grief of my dad, who raised me, Don, and, you know, getting through all of that. It just started to flow into oh, now I've got this job, well paid, making my own living. I'm going to save some money. I went to the UK, fell in love over there, and decided I was going to make a life over there for a bit. And I was there for 6 years. And there wasn't a day that went by when someone said, where are you from? Oh, you're Canadian. Why are you here? And you don't look Canadian. like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean Aboriginal? What do you mean Indigenous? And do you mean the Aborigines in Australia? And I was like, oh, so there's so much teaching. And I really, it started to bother me over time that I didn't know enough. And people kept saying, you will one day, you will one day. So coming back in 2008 to Toronto after, establishing myself pretty much in musical theater, commercial musical theater, I was discovering too that I wanted to tell stories from the Indigenous perspective. And I'd been hearing so much about Native Earth. The Res Sisters had already happened, Dry Lips. I'd heard about them in high school, and I knew there was a company in Toronto that I wanted to work with. Red Sky Performance was another company I'd always wanted to work with. And so that was my mission coming back. And I went to the Indigenous theater community and said, this is my story. This is where I'm at. I want to tell our stories. I want to know where we come from. I want to understand this land. I want to understand how we tell stories differently. And they've helped me so much on the journey of discovering myself and what it means. I had the gift of premiering a new work called Giweden, which means the North Wind, which was a First Nations opera that was co-produced by an Indian Rights Reserve, but they're now called Unsettled Scores. Please check them out. They have lots of new works happening. And I've worked with them several times over the course of my life. It's been very fruitful and fulfilling. And then, Native Earth, they produced this opera, and I got to play a wolf, a soprano singing wolf, and singing really high and howling and literally on all fours. And my name is Maigan, and we were singing in Anishinaabe English and some French. And it was the first time I was being introduced to the language, or that particular language. And there's such power in saying the languages, and I was being introduced to smudging and this practice of how we honor our stories, how we honor our ancestors through these stories. So I was slowly understanding the work that needed to happen for myself, and that being Mahigan, playing that, embodying and saying, I am Mahigan, I was like, it was a catalyst for opening up, that spiritual relationship and understanding what spirit is and what our spirit helpers are. And when we acknowledge the language and the past, how powerful that is as performers, but also as individuals, and the wellness, how it helps our health, our wellness, our sense of being, our identity. And to be able to do that was a dream come true. And it was a really amazing group of people that they brought together for that. And they also cast me in I'm going to say a heartbreaking play that was written but a beautiful play, heartbreaking and beautiful, written by Marie Clements, called Tombs of the Vanishing Indian. And Jennifer Kreisberg wrote the songs and did the sound design. So we had a beautiful time learning that language, like the language of the play. And it was in English, but there was Marie has a very poetic way of delivering storyline, and it's a very tough storyline about the sterilization of Native women. So I will sing that song in honor of those women, that history, and the healing that we've been doing when we find out all of these atrocities that have happened, because it's part of that systemic, unfortunately, that systemic genocide that's happened slowly over the years. And she had given me permission to sing it, and we learned it years ago. This is, I'm trying to remember, 2011. And so I recommend reading the play if you can. It's called Tombs of the Vanishing Indian. And this is the Lone Woman song. Choku heya, choku heya, choku heya, choku heya, toku pangaya, toku pangaya, toku pangaya, toku pangaya. Achtan, achtan, oh yeah. Achtan, oh yeah, yeah, yo. Achtan, 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 oh yeah. Hi, yo, yeah, yo. Hi, yo, yeah, yo. Yeah, yeah, yo, yeah, yo. Oh, yeah, yeah, yo, yeah, yo. Ay, ay, yo, hey. Ay, ay, yo, hey, yeah, yeah, yo. Oh, yeah, yo. Ay, ay, yo, yeah, yo. Ay, ay, yo, yeah, yo. Yeah, yeah, yo, yeah, yo. Oh, yeah, yeah, yo, yeah, yo. Ay, ay, yo, hey. Ay, ay, yo, hey, yeah, yeah, yo. Oh, yeah, yo. Ay, ay, yo, ay, ay, yo, yeah, yo. Ay, ay, yo, yeah, yo. Hey, yeah, yo, hey, yo. Oh, hey, yeah, yo, hey, yo. Ay, ay, yo, hey. Ay, ay, yo, hey, yeah, yeah, yo. Oh, yeah, yeah, yo. Language. Thank you, everyone involved with that project, because it opened up a huge flood for me, a flood of healing that needed to happen. The character in that, I portrayed a doctor that finds out what's going on and who has also been adopted, and she discovers her sister. And so it was really foreshadowing what was about to happen for me, and the necessary coming home that had to happen. So I was encouraged by a lot of people involved in that production to seek out the elders nearby, and went to Anishinaabe Health Toronto, who I am indebted to. The traditional program there, and the healers and the medicine people have helped me so much since then, and continue to. I really carry all of them like family in my heart, in these songs and everything that all my teachings, any of the knowledge and the sacred items that I carry now is because of seeking out that help from them. And was encouraged to participate in some sweat ceremonies and to find out where I come from, to heal, to be sober, to make that commitment to my health. I guess I had never really thought about sobriety or how I was quietly processing everything that I was figuring out and learning. This sort of not really thinking about how much I drank or if I was smoking a joint with a friend, which I didn't think was a big deal because everybody else did it and it was just all around me, and I didn't question it. And it wasn't until I was told, well, if you have to go see this elder, you need to be free of alcohol and drugs for 4 days. And that's when I went, oh, okay. So I kind of just did it. And then I thought, I've never really thought about that. I never thought about why or how often or how much I had. And so after meeting that first elder and the magic that came out of meeting her, I shouldn't say the magic, the healing, the counsel, I realized I had to make a decision and chose that sobriety. And then it was going to a sweat ceremony in Vancouver, my first one. And I met an elder there who said, I know your community. And I'd spent all these years not knowing, how am I going to find McAllister's? She said, I know that community, I'll help you. And she happened to be at that sweat. And I'd been sober about a month, and I was talking about it and was introduced to tobacco to put down my offering for help and guidance. And I knew I had a bear with me who was, and I had already was carrying that knowledge of being told you're part of the bear clan, and honor your bear with your tobacco and pray when you can, and just, keep going. You're doing great. And this elder used to say, it's such an honor to meet you. And I felt like there's so much I didn't know. And I had to get over that. And I was blown away by, once I made that commitment, how fast everything started happening in my healing, and how the sacred items and the people started shifting in my circle. And so I ended up doing an outpatient program at Anishinaabe Health Toronto. Nobody ever came out and said, you have a problem, Nicole, you're an addict, or you have an addiction problem. No one ever said that. It was that I went in, I did the intake, and they said, well, if you'd like to, you can start learning about how we heal. And that's the difference in terms of like Western medicine, I think. And there's so much labeling that happens, and then yet there was a beautiful way that I just felt like I was at school in a way, learning about all these things. And I was just so hungry for it too. It just fed me in so many ways. So part of the program there, it's outpatient, so there's a flexibility to it. So I was able to do some performing while I was attending group therapy, one-on-one counseling. There was a doctor of psychology that I saw, and I had so much support from my family, and my ex-husband at the time as well had quit drinking, and so that I could figure it all out. And it was a big change. It was such a big change. And it affects your whole life when you start making these big shifts. And some people, I kind of think I was saying to somebody once, I said, people say they're like a born again Christian. I was like, I'm a born again Indian. It's like one way of looking at it. But I had some beautiful projects that I did because of all that work, and all the synchronicities that started happening to encourage me and tell me that I was on the right path. And it was such an honor to be invited by Barbara Kroll, who's a Dawa composer who I've worked with a few times. And she wrote a tribute, not a tribute, more of a cycle, orchestral piece. And it was a 13 moon cycle of the life, the birth and death of Tecumseh. And it was called Wezuag Anan. So that's his name, the comet across the sky. So to finally learn about this warrior and this history, and going, oh my gosh, I went to Tecumseh Public School never knowing all this. And I got to play male. I got to play a man. I played him, his mother. And she spoke to someone who spoke the language, and I was speaking in Shawnee. And it was so close. There's a lot of similarities to Anishinaabe. So when I was approaching it, and she was great, she said, just when you're listening to the language, think of it as music. And it's so musical. So that was such a gift to read about his life and portray him, and to perform down in Windsor with the Windsor Symphony Orchestra. And I was actually not just doing text and speaking as him, embodying him, but it was also choreographed and directed by Alejandro Ronceria, who I'm sure some of you out there might have worked with, one of our Indigenous leaders and cultural workers in Canada here, and all over Turtle Island, all over the world. He's worked all over. and I got to dance in it. So it was the first time I was actually, wow, I'm doing singing, dancing, acting, and like I'm introducing something of a cultural nature, like we're sharing history here. It was like monumental, and it was when I was feeling the power of that medicine and what that does. Like that performing is like a medicine. It is like a ceremony. And you know, we were smudging beforehand and smudging at the end, and I knew in speaking the language that was like there's an activation in the universe when we speak out loud any language of a nation, of a people. So that was a huge honor and a highlight, definitely a highlight. When I started, and I knew that was, I remember after, we only got to do it twice, I think. And I remember I just bawled my eyes out when I did the last show, because the last concert, because I knew I would never be doing it again. And it was such an honor. Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful time. And The Great Mountain was a piece with Red Sky. It was a theater for young audiences. And I was going through some, like, it was hard as I was learning all these huge teachings and history, historical backgrounds, and, you know, what we represent as people. And, you know, am I allowed to speak this language even though it's not my bloodline? There's all of that that goes on too when you're trying to honor, even though, you know, if you say you're Indigenous, people, well, what's your nation? Where are you from? What's your band? What's your, so when we're artists like this who portray so many things as based on our look, there's a huge, I feel a tremendous pressure, and like self-inflicted, obviously, but it's because you want to give honor to those ancestors, and you realize it has survived, this language has survived the assimilation. So working on Indigenous theater and Indigenous stories from all over is so fulfilling in that way. And we are looking at, now there are so many people looking at how we decolonize the process when we're telling these, because we have to look after ourselves. If we don't, then it's like a ceremony, like it's draining, you're channeling things. And I had to figure out how I was going to look after myself, you know, and I didn't really know that at the beginning. I had to learn the hard way. Like, I think going through that first Tombs of the Vanishing ending was a real, like, through the ringer. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to do, I barely knew how to smudge. I didn't quite understand how drumming worked. So, and it, you know, each time I did a performance, like when I did the Red Sisters finally, and I learned the Strong Woman song, and we sang it at the end of that production that was in Peterborough. Patty Shaughnessy produced and was starring in it too. And I finally felt like, oh, okay, this is like iconic. This is a historical moment for me to be working with these strong Indian women, these strong women, you know. And I say Indian, like, obviously carefully, oh, we're not supposed to say that, but we use it with each other when we're, and Thompson Highway, who wrote the Red Sisters, he uses it throughout his play, because it's like how we reference each other when we're in the piece, you know. I mean, side note. I'd love to share a couple more songs. I had to, after my, I took some time off when I fell pregnant, and fast forward, I guess, I had acquired a beautiful bundle to look after going out fasting a few times. And I knew there was a time coming for me to be a mother, and I really felt drawn to that. And I had sort of dreamed of doing another Indigenous piece that would enlighten people, help towards healing, like that we're helping people in the audience understand who we are as Canadians and our history as Indigenous people. So being invited by the Blythe Festival to do Ipperwash, which is this particular production was a premiere production, and it's its own version of Ipperwash, because there was a second remount, but it was a totally different show. This version was written by Phelan and Jessica Carmichael and directed by Jessica Carmichael. And they had, you know, caught wind and heard about my journey up to that point, how I'd really started working on myself and finding out more. I'd been reconnected with my birth family. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot to acknowledge. I found my sister. I found out I had a sister named Bonnie. That's like a huge deal. That's a whole other like conversation that I feel like, and like Hey, Darcy, we could do like a 60s scoop. What was it like to reunite or whatever that is? So tune in some other time somewhere else. But I need to give a shout out to our birth sister Bonnie, who got to meet finally. I got to meet in 2013. So when I graduated from I sort of graduated from the addictions mental health program at Anishinaabe Health, and was gifted a beautiful, beautiful eagle feather to mark that sobriety and that good path and to continue and keep going. And it gave me so much strength because I was really nervous about like my recovery and just stabilizing and being good on my own. But yeah, being guided to her and finding out. So the elder that I met, Maureen Kennedy from Vancouver, connected me and said, yeah, found your family, you got a baby sister. And she was adopted right away from the hospital, and she was on record. She had a file, and she went straight into the foster care system. And so when she got her report back, she knew about Matthew and I, but we didn't know about her. She had no way of connecting with us. So meeting that elder and being where I was, like, that was just meant to be. And that's the beauty of spirit. And when you start working with medicines and you start honoring your ancestors and acknowledging them, and that all guided me personally. I know that's what guided me to her and to connecting with the rest of my birth family. And the family that my birth mother was raised with, the Ostroms. So I hope I get to make it out to Alberta again soon. I've only been out there three times now. But side note, so I was carrying all of that too. So becoming a mom myself, obviously thinking about family. When I was asked to do this piece, April Wash, it was about the healing that was happening in the community at Kettle and Stony Point First Nation. Kettle Point and Stony, oh my gosh, I can't even talk. It's like, oh, what time is it? That's why, because we've been going for a long time. Kettle and Stony Point First Nation. Kettle Point and Stony, like, it's so funny how I mix that up. Oh yeah, I'm wearing their shirt too. This was from their Unity gathering. And this is also one of their acclaimed artists, Moses Lenham. This is his design, Blue Thunderbird, that's our son. This is actually my partner's drum, it's Jason's drum, but use it for tonight. We worked with the land. We went out there and did our best to work with the community when we told that story and shared what was going on, because there's so much that got lost to the media interpretation and government interpretation of what that is. Something you can check out online if you wanted to look up I don't even know how you would title it, Ipperwash crisis, or there's so many families that were impacted and that community, in reclaiming their rightful land back. We felt really honored to share their story and try to tell it with as much community counsel and to give them honor and to help them. So not just help them, but to raise awareness, because the Blythe Festival is just an hour or so away from there. And so it's helping non-Indigenous people understand the land that they're on, and all the people that buy cottages there and, enjoy the beautiful Lake Huron sunsets. We were working with the medicines and smudging and acknowledging and as much as we could. So we wanted there to be a song too, because the other character in this whole story was the water. And so we wrote a water song, spending time there. And if you have never been to a Lake Huron sunset, I highly recommend it. Lake Huron I've just got to spend so much time there working at Blythe I only worked there for 2 seasons, but my partners worked there, and I was there when I was pregnant with Dawn. So I really feel like I have a relationship, not just with the water, but also with the community there too, have made me feel welcome. It's like another home away from home. So this song we performed throughout the show, and it was meant to be like a healing song. So if you learn it, please share it and just make sure you say, this is the This is the Ipperwash water song. And those of you who have shakers or drums, or like, join me on this if you want. Don't be shy. We can't hear you. You can join us, and or your rattles, or not even. Just enjoy. Language. When that community came to, we had a special preview where we invited that community to come see the show, and it was a powerful night, and I could feel from the stage that healing that was happening, and it's so much of it is like coming to terms and having that acceptance of what was and what can be and what we're moving towards, in a nutshell. Which is easier said than done. But I'm always, it's such a bigger story for so many communities that are, looking at what the land does for us, and how the water helps us, and how sacred the water is, and that water is life. We come from water. So to honor the water, to honor where we come from, that sacred water that we were carried in our birth mothers, is so powerful to do that every day. When we have a shower, thank that water. When we drink the water, and there's so much. I've only just been learning. I've only been on this, what I call this road of, like, I don't want to label it. This particular road with my sacred items. In this way, it's not been very long. I'm very new to it all. I'm still figuring it all out, but it has helped me so much and makes so much sense to me when I'm giving that gratitude. So in the storyline, we acknowledge, in that particular storyline, we also acknowledge the veterans. And some of you will know this song because I sang it at Celebration of Nations, which is going to be going into their third year this year. We'll be online. But I had a very last minute occurrence happen a couple of years ago when I was there with my son, we were just happy to march. So it's like an arts education festival that happens in St. Catharines. And last minute, I was asked to carry the Anishinaabe flag. And so I remember thinking, is that okay? Like, my bloodline isn't Anishinaabe, but yet I feel it's what I know and who my elders are, and being raised in Mississauga, Torontonian, seeking out the knowledge keepers from this area. Like, that's what I know. So it was such an honor to hold that flag, and then also had a song to offer because they were acknowledging the veterans. So in Ipperwash, there is a storyline that follows the veterans that went off to war and came back and didn't have homes. Their homes were all taken. And there's actually a book that's been written. I forget his name, forgive me. But it's firsthand accounts of veterans that came back from the war and didn't have a home to come home to after serving their country. So we honored them in the show with this piece, which I feel like is a good thing to sing at Remembrance Day gatherings too now, because I have yet to hear something that's recognizing the Indigenous warriors. So if you go to listen to this again and you hear this recording, I encourage you to learn this song and sing it on Remembrance Day for our elders and our veterans, but also those serving who come back and who continue, the generations to come, because there's always going to be people serving their country in this way, right? So this is the veteran honor song so as a collective, we sort of came up with it and wrote it. And I remember it's like a collaborative sort of writing that we did together as a cast and with sound designer. And yeah, having that platform to sing it in honor was huge for me, because I felt like Niagara was officially like welcoming me, even though I'd only been here for a few years. There's so many people in the communities here that have said, it's okay, you're here, veteran honor song. Oh, but you know what? We're going to start this again because I forgot to do the thing. Sorry. Okay, let's try it again. Kiinas Komitin, everyone. That yeah, that sorry about that false start. I was like, I was finding myself holding back. So I'm like, I'm gonna blast out these speakers. I'm not tech savvy, sorry about it. But I think I've got to wrap it up to give some time for some questions, don't I, Darcy? Yeah, I think I'm just gonna I'm gonna hand it over to you, I think, Darcy, because there's so much that's happened since that piece, and as you heard from the beginning, you can see my credits online and such. So I won't go into what happened after that, but ever since then, I've noticed that the opportunities, the jobs that I've been given are all a culmination of so many of, like, everything has been preparing me to work in this way and with people who are interested in working in that way, working and acknowledging, understanding our history, telling stories in this way, having the medicines in the room, and creating ways for us to feel safe and empowered as artists. And I see self-care and wellness becoming much more at the forefront of how we work, and how we can sustain and be healthy communities. So I've been very, very grateful to everyone. You know who you are. I wish I could go through an acceptance speech of who's been helping me since. But this tonight is such a tribute to all of you that have helped me on my journey and given me these opportunities to tell stories and to share what I know in community and out and about, with whether it be students or in the community here in Niagara or beyond. And yeah, thank you, Darcy, for tonight. I'll hand it over to you guys now, and I do have a closing song at the very end when you want to wrap it up, and you can sort of sign off. And for those of you that trickled in at the beginning, I was singing a welcome song saying, welcome, Bindigin. And I was saying, welcome, good grandmothers, welcome, good grandfathers, welcome, all of creation. That's in Anishinaabe, which is the Indigenous language I'm the most exposed to, most familiar with, and it's sort of what comes to me when I'm writing these songs. It's what filters through sometimes the words. And I was invited to sing that song in the Soil Arts Festival here in Niagara, so shout out to them. And so I'll sing. It's like a tops and tails, so I'll do that at the end as well. But instead, I'll be saying Miigwech. So thank you to close our circle that we've had today. And so I'll pass it over to Darcy and to the rest of the crew who are sending through. I'm sure they'll have lots of questions. I'm like, oh, we're coming up to time. So, you'll get to hear about them if you're deciding to say goodnight to us now. You could always tune in. I think there'll be a recording if you wanted to hear some of the other questions. So I understand if you've scheduled your Zoom meetings and whatnot tonight, you have to shoot off. So thank you for being with me this evening. And I wish you health and safety and wellness during this time.
Wow, that was great, Nicole. Thank you so much for sharing. And with the songs, they were beautiful.
Thanks,
At this point, if anyone in our audience would like to ask any questions, we do have the Q&A, depending on what device you have, if it's on top or down below. And we will
I could sing another song too. I had to just shorten tonight because I'm like, whoa. It always does that.
Yeah, that was awesome.
People have questions.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they trickle in. We have the team standing by. One thing that I had mentioned is near the beginning of your story is when you had mentioned that you grew up in Mississauga. Mm-hmm. So did I.
Yeah. Was it Arundel you were in?
Erin Mills.
Oh, Erin Mills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. I used to hang out in Erin Mills all the time.
Yeah.
There was a time actually in high school we used to go to that Fox and the Fiddle.
Oh yeah.
At Dundas and Erin Mills Parkway there.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely stomping grounds for me growing up. Wow, you were just like the next neighborhood over, and now look, we're here.
Yeah, that's where me and my brother and sister grew up, and then eventually made our way down to the Niagara area. So,
Yeah.
and which is, it's great. You don't hear too many coming from. I know there's many of us grew up all around kind of Toronto area, but it's always good to see others that were like very close to our neighborhoods, and
Yeah. And that's just that way of life, right?
yeah. So
Chicago life.
we have some questions coming in.
Okay.
So, Nicole, can you speak a bit about how you began to sing in the traditional way after training in more classical music?
Oh yeah. Um, that's a great question because the first my exposure to that way of singing was what I'd heard, when you go and see, when we were watching what Hollywood was producing and we saw things like Dances with Wolves and Last of the Mohicans and all those sort of films, and I was like wrapping my head around, well, what's Indigenous, like that's probably not it, and trying to filter through all of that stuff and the romanticization of it and Disney, Disney's version of it, unfortunately, and so the first time I went, where was I when I got it? I got a CD. Oh, I was doing a dance. That's it. I was doing a dance workshop with Santi Smith, Alejandra Ronceria, Patricia Cano was dancing. There was a whole bunch of us. We were dancing, and I started hearing like Indigenous composers and songs. And Santi Smith had commissioned a work, and it was Eulalie. And oh my God, the most beautiful song. I can't remember what it was exactly, but I got my hands on a CD from Eulalie, and that's also, Jennifer Kreisberg also was part of the group as well, and Pure Faye, and so had that CD, and they've performed all over. That was a big influence of mine. And then I was a backup singer for Tamara Podemsky when she was launching her a couple of her debut albums, and she asked me to sing backup for her back in 2000. When was that? 2002. I'm gonna say 2002. Yeah, because I'd finished Mamma Mia, and we went to Winnipeg for a music festival, and I got to hear some, like, I'd never seen so many Native people gathered together. It was the first time. I'd never been to a powwow yet at that point. I was like, wow. And so hearing actual, like, the big drum there for the first time with men singing. And then I eventually got to go see, my first powwow was a Six Nations powwow around that same time, I think. So that was my first, like, and we're talking early 20s when I started hearing it really. And then it wasn't till I worked with, so the transition into that was learning the Strong Woman song for the Red Sisters in Peterborough. I played Emily Dictionary in that production, and just before the renovation of the Market Hall there. And I remember them all going, oh yeah, we'll just do the Strong Woman song at the end. And it's like one of those things when you're in community, and if you've been around community, it's like, oh yeah, everyone knows the Strong Woman song. There's always that person who's like, I've never sung it before. So it's, they're like, what? You don't know? Okay, we're going to teach you, Nicole. So I was like, whoa, this was a huge deal for me to learn that. And then, of course, we hear it now, and you will hear it if you start attending socials and gatherings, because it's that was the first time. And I guess the other opportunity I had, I remember it was in Giweden, the First Nations opera. There was actually a song where we got to sing a little bit, and I remember I hadn't come to terms with being okay with singing in that way, and I felt like a fraud, and I was overcoming my own, like, well, I'm not from here, I shouldn't be singing like this, I don't know what I'm doing, it was all that I had to work out. And Spy, the composer, Spy and Catherine, composer, and they were in the room, and I remember they helped me through that, because I felt like it was like a real healing moment. And Marion Newman was with me too. She played the lead, Nunquay, and she's from out west. So we were both like, what are we doing? And we had to overcome that too, like to own a song that was from the earth and from the land, because we were portraying people that were not, just because we were Indigenous, but we were portraying a territory and a history of, like, it was Spy's family that, you know, this was a telling from his viewpoint, you know, his ancestral lineage, and being from Temiskaming, and it was about the history of the railway coming through. And so, yeah, I had to overcome that. It was really hard. And I guess I just kept listening. And it was more when I started attending ceremony and going to sweat ceremonies, being in the lodge, learning, hearing the songs over and over again, I started picking them up very quickly. And I knew I could sing them in the lodge. And there was also Gloria May Eshkabak. I don't know if you're tuned in. Shout out to Gloria. She had an amazing workshop that they did up in Manitoulin Island, and we were learning all the hymns in Anishinaabemowin that were being sung in the local church. But she also had written a whole, like, musical piece as well in the language, and so started seeing that fusion of worlds there. And she knew a lot of songs. She was the original one of the Emily dictionaries, and she was a res sister, and so I started gaining more confidence learning them from her. And then other people out in the community, like, it was literally just repeat, hearing it over and over. And I knew I had to learn the bear song once I knew I was Bear Clan, because I knew I had to honor that bear. So I made sure that was like one of the first songs I learned, and the wolf song in ceremony. And I guess because of my classical background and just there's obviously that intrinsic thing that happens when you know it's in you and it's in your bloodline, or I don't know, it took me some time to own it in my own way, and to birth my own songs. That took time, because I felt like I needed to feel familiar in my own skin first, and with my items, because I know the drums and everything I look after, they're looking after me. So when I was able to quiet my mind enough, and I could hear melodies coming in, you know, and things are being channeled through me. So I am, I do have a song that I have written in this pandemic too, which I'm developing. So next time we have something like this, maybe you'll hear it. But now I feel confident in that whatever I do, it's just coming from me. It's just my own truth for now. And it may not be like sensational, but it's a process. And yeah. Hope that answers the question. Ooh,
Yeah, that was great. There is another question out here, but a message from Kim, but it's a question that it could take semesters to learn. But if you could,
if I promise you to do it in a nutshell version.
Okay, well, you're gonna hear it.
Oh,
Okay. So how do you suggest we, the white Canadians, go about to fully support our Indigenous neighbors and their struggles, from having clean water, housing, health support, and land claim rights? We only recently have come to know of the trials and tribulations our government and churches have inflicted, and are appalled and astonished and heartbroken. Okay.
Can you read just the beginning of that again, Darcy?
How do you suggest we, the white Canadians, go about to fully support our Indigenous neighbors?
Yeah.
It's a big question.
That's a really big question. And you know what? You know what I'm going to do, Kim? And I'm really sorry to do this. That's not for me to answer. You have to find the answer. You've just written that out for me, but I actually want you to look at that question and find out, because that's not for me to show you. That's what I feel really strongly. So that's my nutshell answer, is like, you have to find out.
Okay.
So there's a teaching in that. Does that make sense to you, Darcy, why I'm doing that?
It does, absolutely.
Like, there's so much I could say that's like obvious. There's obvious stuff, like,
right.
I have a friend that made a donation to the Native Women's Resource when she discovered that they existed, and as an offering. And I was like, that's awesome, because that supports programs of wellness that I've actually accessed. Like, I remember when I didn't have much money, I went and they had a meal program in Toronto. And I was like, when I didn't have any money, I would go have a meal with the community that they offered. And so like find out where you are, find out whose land you're on. That's like number one. Whose land are you on? Which territory? There's so many resources out there. But I'm just here tonight to share my story and like give you a glimpse of how these songs have come to be because of being a performing artist. But that question for me is like, that's an allyship. How to become an ally. And that is like you said, Darcy, that's another workshop. That's another. But if I bet you could find the answer. If you sit with that question, which is a phenomenal question, it's a great question. Marinate on that, because you putting that out into the universe for yourself, I really believe the answers will come. And if you really want to find out, you will. And if you trust that your path will guide you on that, then trust your own instincts. And like we have beautiful teachings about humility and honesty, truth, wisdom, respect, love, bravery, courage. Like our teachings are so beautiful and they bring you back to the basics. But like I always say, like I always feel things are more simple when I go back to the land or I go for a walk and go from there. Find out whose land you're on, where you're living, and go from there. Acknowledge the land, thank the water.
That's great. That is perfect. So we have Beatrice and Monica that really want to thank you for sharing your story and your journey with us, and as well as your songs. I think this gives us a perfect opportunity to close out. And if you would, one thing before you do that, I would just like to share with our audience, if you want to re-see this or the other events that we hosted, you could go to the Niagara Falls Museums.ca and be able to access each of the 4 events that was for the 4 Directions speaker series. I'm going to leave it to you now, Nicole, if you're ready to give us a closing song. And I would also thank everyone for coming in to hear Nicole speak. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Darcy. Thank you, everybody. So this is, I like to close our gathering with this song that gives thanks. And so it's the same, you'll recognize it, hopefully it's the same one I started with, but instead now I'm saying thank you, good grandmothers, thank you, good grandfathers, thank you, all of creation. Thank you to all of your ancestors too, because they are with you tonight. And, you know, that's our belief system. Like we're with them and they're with us. And so thank you to all of your ancestors too that have been with us tonight. And anyone who gets to hear this at another time, which is so bizarre to me that's recorded. It lives on. So thank you. And those yet to come, you know, those new ones, those ones coming through and being born. I sing these songs. I follow this culture for my son, dedicate this to my son and all my relatives who've come before me, and all my relatives here now in my existence, my circle, my family, my community, my country, Turtle Island and beyond, you know, and those yet to come. If that's one thing I hope you can walk away with, like we all have our own story and we all have a purpose. We all have gifts to share. So this is for you. Say good night. Thank you, Miigwech, Kinana Skomitin, and RC. Hey, march. Dawn way mark. Way ah hey ah oh way ah hey oh way ah way 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 oh way oh way oh. Woo! Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much to my mom, my dad, my other mom, my other dad, my brothers, my sisters, my partner Jason, my son. Thank you so much, Darcy. Everybody out there. Very, very grateful.
Yes, thank you so much too. That was amazing.
Oh, I'm so
You
glad.
know, that's yeah, that's can't think of closing this out any better way. So yeah.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Be well, be safe.
Okay.